Hello. Um, Thank you for joining me earlier on my smaller video that I put up this morning. And that was just introducing you really to the idea of what theme or issue was, and introducing that idea of conflict, how we break it down, and just reminding you the idea that the structure of your comparative study answer, it won't ever change. So it doesn't matter if it's theme or issue that you're answering on, general vision and viewpoint, or indeed literary genre, that essential structure doesn't ever actually change. So what I want just to cover very, very briefly this evening, because I'm mindful that I did cover a little bit this morning, I want to go further into the theme of conflict, and I wanted to focus specifically on the texts of Foster by Claire Keegan and A Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen. Now, many of you will be familiar with those two texts. They're always firm favourites on the Leaving Certificate English course, so many of you will be studying one, if not both of those on your course this year. So just as a little bit of a recap, in case anybody didn't manage to catch my video this morning, when we look at the idea of conflict, we need to make sure that conflict is so well developed that it continues all the way through the text. It must be present in more than one area. So the theme is not the theme if it's not present in relationships, if it's not present in your characters and the sense of their own identity, if it's not present in the makeup of society. It must be present across the board for you to be able to definitely say, this is a theme and it is strong enough for me to study as part of my comparative course. The ways that I have suggested breaking the theme of conflict down is into conflict in the self, conflict in society, conflict in relationships, and finally the resolution or the conclusion of that conflict. So let's start very, very briefly. This is what I always do, right? May seem a little bit haphazard, but bear with me. Always you identify at the very top of your page, a little bit of rough work. This is my theme. Underneath, I have text 1 and I have text 2. So text 1 here is Foster and text 2 is A Doll's House. And underneath there, I have broken down into the subheadings of the different kinds of conflict that I have encountered or I possibly may encounter as I investigate this theme. So I have inner conflict, which is conflict in the self. I have societal-based conflict. I have conflict in relationships, and I have the resolution of that conflict. So thinking about conflict in the self, let's look at Foster. Your main character is the girl in Foster. Is she at war with herself? Is she conflicted inside her? Of course she is. But how? You have a little girl who is part of a big family that don't have much money, and she is being asked to obey the wishes of her parents and to allow herself to be transplanted from one family home to another family home because her family don't have enough money to support her and feed her. She must be fighting that internally. And more than that now, she's a little girl who has never been loved and a little girl who doesn't know how to love. So finding herself in the home of the Kinselas and suddenly being bombarded with these declarations of love, being told that it's okay that she wet the bed. You know, you have this strong contrast between Dan and Mary and John and Edna, where John and Edna provide a safe haven for this girl, and it's okay if she wets the bed, because it's what happens. It's okay if she doesn't want to say her prayers. Everything is okay. And the fact that she needs that reassurance shows you that she is conflicted inside herself. She is at conflict with herself. There are many, many symbols all the way throughout the text. So you'll see the footprints change as she walks with John Kinsella. She's conflicted as to the idea of what a family is. She's conflicted as to the idea of love and how she should love. So there's an awful lot of conflict going on within this little girl. On the other side, we're going to try and connect that to conflict, inner conflict, in A Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen. In A Doll's House, you have Nora. And Nora is playing the role of the pretty, obedient wife in a patriarchal society, not unlike Foster, which is also set in a patriarchal society. So you have Nora, and Nora is conflicted because Nora has a secret job where she was earning secret money. She took out a loan. She forged a signature. Nora led a double life, and she didn't announce this fact because partly she was proud of her achievements and her secrets, but mostly because she knew living in a patriarchal society, this breaking of the rules would not be permitted, and therefore she is at conflict with herself. She leaves at the end with a firm slam of the door. She has shattered the walls on that society. She has shattered the conflict within herself, and she has put herself first. So you can track that inner conflict all the way from Foster right across to A Doll's House. Equal measures or different measures, it depends on how you view it. The conflict in society then is very, very interesting for both texts. Obviously, it is a patriarchal, religious-based, traditional society in Foster. We see the girl, we see Edna, we see lots of your characters at conflict with their world. Certainly, Edna is a very strong female role, and she's lucky enough to be in a supportive marriage that is proud of that and that embraces that, but other marriages at that time did not. And it was a society that did not reward free-speaking women, that did not award disobedient women, and that continues right through into A Doll's House, where you can see that same reality facing Nora. Nora must be the pretty little wife who dances for her husband and who says all the right things, but in reality, that's not who she wants to be. It's not the kind of society that embraces the kind of person that she is. So her society literally rejects her. And that goes for both of your texts. You can see it in the girl, you can see it even in Mary. I mean, poor Mary, married to Dan, is left at home with the children while her alcoholic, gambling husband spends the money. Her society is so conflicted, and there is a better way for her to be. But she's not brave enough to take that better road, as was the case for so many women in that time in Ireland. You are spoiled for choice with things to talk about, but do break it down and do think, is it here? Yes. Is it here? Yes. So conflict in the self, you have conflict in society, you have conflict in relationships. So obviously here you are looking at the very, very negative relationship between Dan and Mary, coupled beautifully with the very negative relationship between Nora and Helmer. And you can really argue the toss between which you think is the most negative of those, but certainly there is ample conflict in those two relationships. Now you do have over here John and Mary, and they represent a much more positive view of those relationships, but there is that conflict in there. And you do see evidence that although Nora defies the role of women as set out in that society, she is still overruled by John. So that relationship is not completely equal. So that is a nice, interesting point to put into your answer when you are exploring the idea of conflict. So remember, it doesn't have to be huge. You're looking at 3/4 of a page between text 1, text 2, text 3, personally engaging all the way, identifying your key moments and linking them into each other. You just don't have the time or the space to develop your answer any further than that. The onus is on you to show how well you can answer that answer while being as brief as possible so as not to exhaust the point that you are making. Finally, it brings you down then to the resolution of your conflict. So how was this conflict resolved, or was it even resolved? Was it resolved to the satisfaction of your characters? Did it allow for character development? Did it provide a benefit or a bonus to the development of that character? Did your society change? Is that how this conflict was resolved? Whatever it is, you take the examiner and the reader right through those conflict resolutions in your final point. So intro, point 1, conflict in the self. Point 2, conflict in society. Point 3, conflict in relationships. Point 4, resolution of that conflict. And finally, for the final paragraph then, is your conclusion, where you reiterate the main points that you've made. You again state where you lie with regard to the question being asked, and you personally engage all the way through to give the examiner a good sense of the kind of student that you are and the way that you view things. And that makes a world of difference, to be honest, because if somebody sitting beside you in the exam answers the same question, you don't want to be the same as them. You don't want to repeat a series of answers or notes that have been printed off for you. The examiner knows all that. What they want to know is how you view things, what your take on it is, how you feel something was developed and explored, and what the benefits, negatives, insights, all of that associated with it are. Okay, so that is your theme of conflict broken down, looking at Foster, looking at A Doll's House. Ideally with that then you can pair up Juno or you can pair up Brooklyn, and they would be the tidiest fit in terms of those two questions. We will deal with those a little bit separately. I'm dealing with Foster and A Doll's House together because they are similar, very, very tightly coupled in how closely they look at everything. They're also two beautiful texts to look at if you're going to explore the idea of the general vision and viewpoint in both of those texts. Okay, so I will try my best to pop on either tomorrow or the day after. I am mindful that the Christmas exams are coming up, and it's in your best interests to be as prepared as possible before your Christmas holidays. So at least then you're coming out on the other side in January, ready for your mocks, and you have an awful lot of work and sample answers done under your belt. So my advice is take out the exam papers, start going through the questions that have come up in past papers for the comparative studies. Let there be nothing that you are unprepared for. Don't let all of this go to waste. Take this help, take this information, do something with it. People have been contacting me nonstop over the last 2 weeks to ask me questions, to ask my opinion on certain things, or to ask me to check some of their work. So please, by all means, do go ahead and follow suit. You can contact me on Facebook under Tramore Tuition. You can leave a comment under here and I will come back to you. Or you can email me on tramoretuition@gmail.com. All right, thank you very much.